O'Reilly! You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly. Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about these are pointless in fantasy in the sense
and
that
Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Oh man, it feels like it's been so long since I've been by this microphone. I'm off the IR, people. I'm back for week 5, finally. No more technological issues, no more business trips. I'm back and ready to talk week 5 preview here in the Operation Domination Show. Thanks for tuning in on our YouTube channel at FF Advice Network, on our social media feeds as well. You can always check out fantasysportsadvice.com, find my rankings, you can find Chase's rankings, and you can find all of our content when you sign up as a pro member there, just for $5 a month or $50 for the year. It's totally worth it with a 24/7 support to help you guys in all of your fantasy sport endeavors. I got my two main guys here. I got Chris Dowhower, Adam LaRue in the building. Chase is not going to be able to join us. Of course, I come back and then he's got to do a trip. And it's, one of these days we'll get all 4 amigos together. But until then, we still have a great show in store for you guys here today. So let's go ahead and get right into the breaking. Well, there's quite a bit to talk about. So Davante Adams, who has a real injury, by the way, I want to be real clear about that. They made sure they was real clear about that today. But he comes out and he requests a trade. So how about that? Didn't take long. Now, if you guys remember, back in the summertime, I was one predicting that Davante Adams would be traded to the Jets before the trade deadline. Okay? That's one of his favorite destinations. And now we're at the point where he's already demanding out of Las Vegas. I'm a little surprised that it's just out of week 4 and this already happened. But a couple questions for Chris and Adam here. 1, do you think he gets traded? 2, if he does, where does he get traded to? And 3, from a fantasy perspective, what do you make of all this? Go to Chris and then Adam.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think he's definitely get traded. When it's the kind of cat's out of the bag, so to speak, for this Raiders team. They have no cap. They have nothing on the hook for him next year if they move on from his contract this year. So basically, they can get something now versus not getting anything. Once he asked to get traded, I think that pretty much solidified it. I don't know what happened with the whole Antonio Pierce liking or not liking social media posts, but I do think one of the issues was, and I do question Dan. I'm not saying Davante Adams is faking his injury by any stretch of the means, but I also wonder. We heard about business decisions. And Davante Adams seemed to be pro-anti Antonio Pierce about the business decisions. And my reaction when I first heard that comment was, is this directed towards somebody like a Davante Adams? I know that, Jack Jones took a lot of the brunt for that comment, but I think there's more people that he was commenting about. So overall, I do think he's going to get traded. Where it'll wind up being fantasy-wise, I do think it's going to be very interesting where he lands up. I think the Jets are probably the leaders. I think that's probably the best fit, for where you think he could wind up and pop potential to be able to put up some points. I like the New Orleans possibility as well. The only issue I have for New Orleans is the offensive line is so beat up. It's not going to matter who they have a receiver right now. And there's a lot of other teams I would love to see him on, Dan. But when it comes to who can actually swallow that contract and will actually make that move, and let's not forget, has to know the system. Davante Adams is not going to be a guy that you're going to want to have to take time to transition into your offense. If you're going to go second rounder, you're going to want to hit the road, running. So I think there's only limited teams he winds up, and I think fantasy-wise, it could, hurt it in the degree depending on if he winds up on some team that doesn't pass the ball at all. But I think it winds up just being a worst, equal trade. Gardner Minshew's throwing the ball right now. So, and they had a murder schedule coming up as it was even without the hamstring injury.
Well, Adam, let me get your take on this, because if you have Davante Adams right now, are you looking to buy or are you looking to sell?
I think it depends. I think you probably lean in towards holding for the trade, because kind of, Chris, to your point, there's not many worse passing offenses that he can go to from where he's currently at. It's kind of hard to downgrade. The question I think becomes is he the one where he goes? And I think in most spots that's the case. I think it gets interesting with the Jets, especially on one hand. Garrett Wilson is the future. He's the future. He's the young talent. But at the same time, he's also not on the same page with Aaron Rodgers yet. So it's a genuine question mark, because on one hand, the organization's tied to Garrett Wilson in the long term. On the other, it's not working so far. I think the talent is there. It's just, getting on the same page with the quarterback. And Davante Adams is already on the same page with the quarterback. So I think it's a case by case, but on the whole, I think on average, you're going to work out better holding on to or buying Davante Adams than you are selling, just because I don't think that he puts up lower points than he has been with the Raiders anywhere.
Bye. Yeah, to both your points, I don't think he can get much worse than he's on the Raiders right now. It's funny with Garrett Wilson say he's the future. I was about to jump in there and say, is he the present? Because it doesn't feel like he's the present. So right. I do think it's interesting. And the Jets are in the present, right? Like, Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. This whole thing needs to work this year. Otherwise, Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett are out of a job. Now, whether you think that should be the case regardless or not is besides the point. If they don't make a deep playoff run, they are out of a job, in fact. Rodgers, does he play next year? Maybe. Does he have anything left at 41? I don't know. But yeah, so they are in the now. And if it's not going to be working out with Garrett Wilson now, I do think it gets kind of interesting. It also gets kind of interesting from the standpoint of right before the season happened, they did some contract shuffling. They're one of the few teams that has the cap room to be able to absorb Davante Adams on top of it. So it does become interesting from that standpoint. And who better than the Jets to go after another big name to stay in the headlines? I think that's a real possibility from that perspective as well. So I do think the Jets, as far as the teams that Davante Adams listed as his favorites, make the most sense to me. But I don't know that makes the most sense for the team overall. From a fantasy perspective, and Chris and I were talking a little bit about this before the show, from a fantasy perspective, my favorite spot for him would be the Buffalo Bills, right? Desperate for a wide receiver one. You have Josh Allen. It would make all the sense in the world. Will they pull that trigger? Probably not, because remember, they're eating a lot of money out of Stephon Diggs, and they look content to just be this James Cook, Josh Allen-led team. So I don't know if they pull that trigger. That would be my favorite fantasy spot. But overall, I am once again going to buy on the idea that Davante Adams moves on and moves into a better situation. And we've seen receivers change teams mid-season and still work out okay. Here's another part of the breaking news. What about Ramondre Stevenson? Okay, there's a lot of comments today or yesterday, late last night. Gerard Mayo was asked directly about this. He didn't volunteer the information. I do think that's a little bit important to point out that he didn't volunteer necessarily this information. He was asked directly this question, but nonetheless, it still was not great for Ramondre Stevenson when he was asked, are they thinking about starting Antonio Gibson due to Ramondre Stevenson's fumbling issues? Remember, 4 fumbles over the last 3 games. Adam, do you buy into this idea that Ramondre Stevenson might be benched?
I think that he could be benched as far as being the starter. I think he could be benched, as far as maybe the workload shifting. I don't think he gets completely zeroed out. I think it's also worth mentioning that Gibson is a guy who's had these exact same troubles in his career before, so it's not like this is Gibson's the sure-handed guy. That this is a guy who's been benched before for fumbling. I would be concerned, and I am concerned. I do have Ramondre in a few spots. He's someone who I believe in. I have believed in the past, and I am concerned genuinely. But on the whole, I don't think he gets zeroed out. I think you're more concerned about the status of this offense than you are, this.
Chris, what's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to be the guy who ever loses his job for the entire time or gets totally phased out. They paid him a lot of money. You're not going to throw him on the bench. Having said that, you have to make him accountable. He's got 4 fumbles in 4 games as a New England Patriot team, and this is, I think, what Mayo was kind of alluding to. They're very limited on what they can do when it comes to trying to be putting a winning product out there. So one of the things they cannot afford to do is turn the ball over. Ramondre Stevenson had that great first game, but since it's been very pedestrian. So if you're going to be fumbling and not going to be looking great, it's going to be easy for the coach to start talking about, phasing you out a little bit. So I do think it could be a threat to his touches, but Dan, I don't think there's going to be any threat to him being the alpha in that backfield.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The gap might close, right? And he had 2 good weeks. He had 18.6 points the first week, 15 points in the second week. It's been the last 2 weeks has been dreadful, and not all on him as a result of that. A lot of it, Adam's point, the offense has been so bad, and they've been against teams that have been able to control them with decent defenses that they're just not getting the ball back offensively and not getting those opportunities. That's been the biggest culprit of the whole situation. Ramondre fumbling kind of just compounds that situation for them. They paid Ramondre $36 million, guys. He is the highest paid skill position player that the New England Patriots have. They're not going to sit there and bench Ramondre, or at least I don't believe they're going to bench him this week. Do I think this was a shot across the bow to light a fire under his butt to say, hey, guess what? If you keep doing this, this is going to be a problem? Yes, I do think that could be the case. If he fumbles again this week, do I think Gibson could start by name, like as in the first snap, and then it's still Ramondre more than 50% of the time? Yes. I think if nothing else, this closes maybe the gap going into this week between Stevenson and Gibson. If Stevenson has a good game, I think we can go back a little bit to Stevenson getting more of the share that he was getting. Uncle Mike tuned in, or unlike Mike tuned in, and said, can y'all give me some thoughts for fantasy on different questions? The answer to that is yes. Just fire away in the chat, whoever out there is watching and or listening. Okay, so with that, yes, Chase is not with us, but he did still leave us with his best takes for DFS this week and what cocktails he paired them with. So let's get into
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly.
Save on your next oil change at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Choose Castrol Edge Full Synthetic Motor Oil to provide maximum performance and protection for your engine. Get a $15 gift card after rebate when you buy 5 quarts of Castrol Edge for $34.95. Plus 2 times O Rewards points. Offer valid in-store and online at O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
All right, so per Chase's behalf here, he said, look, even though he's out, the bar is not closed. And it's not closed. I'm drinking on his behalf for you guys this week. He's got 4 plays that he wants to talk about for DFS this week, and he's paired each of them with an affordable single malt Scotch whiskey. Jerome Ford is the top one. He's only $5,800 here on DraftKings, and he wants to pair it with a Highland Park 12-year Viking Honor. This whiskey is not too sweet, it's not too smoky, but balanced, just like Ford's skill set. The Commanders have given up the 11th most points to opposing running backs, and Ford is affordable at $5,800, just like a Highland Park. Not to be outdone, though, we do have a wide receiver for you, Dontayvion Wicks. He's $5,000 right now on DraftKings, and he wants to pair him up with a Lafroig, a 10-year. It's a smoky Scotch, and Wicks is expected to smoke the Rams this week, filling in full-time for the injured Christian Watson. The Rams give up the 6th most points to the wide receivers, and Wicks should thrive in a full-time role. He's a wide receiver 1 at a wide receiver 32 price. We do have some bargain bins for you, like the Patriots defense, listed at $2,900. He wants to pair that with an Aberfeldy 12-year. Now, Aberfeld doesn't look like much, but it's better than you expect at first, which is what he thinks of the Pats this weekend on defense. They're facing the Miami Dolphins, who have been terrible since Tua Tagovailoa has been out, and they've been allowing the third most points to opposing defenses. And when you can get a defense with high upside under $3,000, it's worth taking a shot on. Last but not least, we have a Glenn Rose 12-year-old paired with the cheaper quarterback from the Colts-Jacksonville game, whoever that winds up being. If it's Anthony Richardson cannot play, well, guess what? Joe Flacco is only $5,500. If Richardson can go, then Trevor Lawrence comes in at $5,700. Both of these teams give up a ton of points to the opposing quarterbacks. Flacco should be able to burn the Jags down while Lawrence has an opportunity to get right against a terrible Indy defense that gave up 363 yards to the one and only Caleb Williams. The Glen Rose has a tasting notes of leather, old leather, meaning Joe Flacco, and sweet honey that could be the young Trevor Lawrence, making this an easy choice for his pairing. What do you guys think about those four choices there?
I'm feeling the choices, and I definitely like the matchups with the different drinks that he's talking about. And it was just good to see Joe Flacco back out there talking about an old reliable.
I'm going to switch up the question here for Adam, as our Colts fan who's in turmoil right now. Because after watching Joe Flacco, can you really look yourself in the mirror, Adam, as a Colts fan and say, yeah, we need to go back to Anthony Richardson here?
Yeah, because unless I think it would be dumb to move on to Flacco unless you think Flacco wins you the Super Bowl. I think you definitely look at it and go, he's the better passer. There's no question there. I'm not making that argument. But I think it's better for the franchise to figure out if you have a franchise quarterback rather than Flacco would be another Phil Rivers, another Matt Ryan, another Carson Wentz, another Jacoby Brissett, another et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the whole point of the last 2-3 years has been to not do that anymore. And I think you go back on that by going with Flacco. If your primary goal is to win games, I think Flacco is your answer. I just don't think that is the primary goal.
Well, yeah, it can't be right now. Not after what we've seen. And look, I know Richardson is essentially a rookie, right? Based on the amount of games that he's played, but it's a real hindrance. Like, here's go ahead, Adam.
No, I completely agree. Like I said, I do think that Flacco wins you more games, is the better passer. If you have Colts wide receivers in fantasy, I'm sure you would die to have Flacco as the guy. But
well, that's exactly what I was about to bring up. Because look, if you have a Colts wide receiver, if you have a Michael Pittman, if you picked up a Josh Downs, or if you're another team looking at those guys, it's a tricky situation that you're kind of finding yourself in right now, right? Because even for me personally, let's just say, I'm looking at the owners who have Michael Pittman, and I'm wondering, should I try to buy low on them while Richardson is expected, at least right now, to play? Now, you guys should be tuning in tomorrow at 8 o'clock at Fantasy Football Advice Network, because I'll be on with Dr. Brian Scott. We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson's injury and what we expect to see this week if he's going to be able to be active. But if he is, we know Michael Pittman becomes, at best, a wide receiver 3, if you can even play him at all. Josh Downs is irrelevant. But if Richardson keeps going the way he's going, with the history he's had, we may not be able to expect him, just from a health perspective, to be able to stay out there on the field. And then all of a sudden, Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, their value goes up through the roof. So do these guys, and I know we're kind of working a little buy-sell action into here, but Chris, in your opinion, are these guys buy-low options, or you just think it's too risky because it depends on Richardson's health, not necessarily his play?
I think it's too risky unless you know that Richardson's not going to be the guy that's going to be the quarterback. I mean, I want to get into this a little bit when we talk about offensive observations, but if Richardson in the season now is progressing. But I think right now, as Adam, as a Colts fan alluded to, as a pass-catching owner, you really would prefer Joe Flacco. I think that's really telling, especially when John Taylor's banged up right now. A team that is kind of in transition, and the Colts, are they trying to be contenders, or are they still rebuilding? Where are they as a franchise? But the receiving core has basically been stagnant as a result. I mean, they went out and got Mitchell. Everybody got excited about it, but he was very redundant to Pierce in a lot of ways, especially how his fit is with Richardson. Downs came back. I was excited, but we remember last year, Downs wasn't involved in the offense when Richardson was the quarterback. And Michael Pittman's been horrendous with Richardson being the quarterback this year. So I think it's really scary as a receiver and the progress that you're looking for, or what you're going to get from some of these guys, because right now you haven't seen the connections with the quarterback.
Yeah, so we got a few questions coming into the chat, and we want to get to those real quick. So we'll go back to, unlike Mike, he's a 10-man league. He's 1-3. I hear you, man. I hear you. There's a couple leagues where I'm 1-3 too, and the second least points in the league. That's a sinking feeling because you feel like you're not on the right track. He just made some trades, but tell y'all what my team previously was in week 4, and then I'll explain what is the trades after. We'll try to pump that in a little bit. Unlike Mike, we want to try to get to a few people here. We'll get back to him. Jesse Winchester here. Hey guys, I was just offered Tyreek and Stroud for Kyron and Addison. Thoughts? Adam, what do you think about that deal?
Tyreek and Stroud for Kyron and Addison. I think I would be. It's tempting because you just don't know with Tua, right? That is the crux of the issue, because otherwise the better players are on that side, but you can get replaceable at quarterback, and Tyreek is typically not replaceable. But man, it feels like I would love to have Kyron right now if I'm that team. I think if my losses are piling up, I very well consider that trade on the Kyron side. But if I am winning and think I can hold out and keep Tyreek, I think I want to do that. But yeah.
Just FYI, he does say he has Baker as his second quarterback as well.
Yeah, which helps. The loss isn't the biggest in the world at the quarterback position. Yeah, I think if I'm 2-2 or worse, I'm taking the trade. It's a hard consideration otherwise.
Chris, you on board with that?
Yeah, a trade involves keeping or getting Kyron Williams. I want the running back right now. The receivers haven't done squat right now in the season, and it's such a value to have a running back, especially one who's the alpha in the backfield. Whether the Rams are injured or not, Kyron Williams is producing. I want to keep Kyron Williams.
Yeah, right now, look, and you have Saquon, you have Kyron. What other elite running back is out there right now? I mean, Jonathan Taylor just started getting his touches, and then he got banged up. Like all these other running backs, like Bijan, Breeze,
Old reliable, Derrick
Henry's up there too. Yeah, but like a lot of the guys were taken in this top 6 tier that that everybody was falling themselves over for. Quite a few of them are in committee situations or borderline committee situations where they're losing out some touches. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, they're the only ones who are not at the running back position. And look, Tua may come back week 8, but who's to say he doesn't go out with another concussion? We've seen this before when he comes back and I know he's taking some time this time, but he got banged up. It's not inconceivable to see him do it again. And then what happens? I take the trade. I move on. I get an RB1 in my hand, in my back pocket. And with the way Sam Darnold's playing, Jordan Addison could be a real asset here real soon. Be a wide receiver 3 you can consistently play in your lineup. So I think I take that deal. I just want to get to, unlike Mike, I'm not going to read off his entire team here because he tried to list his entire team for before and after the trade. We're just getting into what the trade actually was. So he traded Freiermuth, JSN, and Puka for Laporta and Josh Jacobs. Also did Mahomes and J-Mo for T. Higgins that I win these trades. You won one. You didn't win the other. Okay. So I would not have traded. I don't know why you felt the need to trade Patrick Mahomes and Jameson Winston for T. Higgins. I'm not sure why that was the case. In fact, I probably at this point would rather have Jameson Williams and his upside than T. Higgins. I think it's going to be a battle back and forth. I wouldn't have done that deal. Now, as far as trading away Freiermuth, JSN, Puka for Laporta and Josh Jacobs, that comes back to your need at running back. But Puka's going to be back in a couple of weeks. JSN's been pretty good. He's established himself as the second best target. Now, Freiermuth, look, all the tight ends suck right now, so that's neither here nor there. Laporta himself included. Hopefully he's able to turn it around. We know he has the talent to, but kind of with J-Mo being more of a factor, the targets have been a little harder to come by. So if anything, I think that was kind of an even deal. If you're banking on Josh Jacobs getting going again here soon and Laporta bouncing back. But no, I wouldn't say you won either one. What do you guys think?
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge. From worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I'm with you, Dan. I'm sorry. I'm like Mike. I don't want to be down on your trades now. I'm always about shaking it up, but I think that you didn't do the greatest in some of these moves.
Yeah, Dan, I'm with you. I think that first one could kind of go either way, depending on how you look at some things. But the second one, the JMO one, I can't get behind personally. But hey, kudos to you for at least taking some shots. I think that more than anything, volume of trades can get you by. So
Yeah, and good.
Well, I was going to say, I understand being 1-3 in desperation, and I think that's part where you've seen some of the moves. So I do want to kind of reflect on the first move. Like I said, I don't love the Mahomes JMO at all, but I can understand if you're moving on from Vermouth, JSN, and Puka, you're not even sure he's going back to at least week 8. You have a tight end and at least one of the top tight end options in the game right now. Josh Jacobs is one of the better offenses in football. I know he's starting to lose some time, but I think that's a trade that I definitely can more rationalize as I think about it.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. But with that, always hit us up. You can go to fantasysportsadvice.com, and that way you can hit us up for this kind of advice before you pull the trigger on anything. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll come right back with dominating defense and an offensive observation. We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today. All right, Chris, so hit us with the dominated defense of the week.
All right, so I had been on a pretty good streak, Dan. I apologize. The Cleveland Browns let me down last week. I didn't realize going into the show that Myles Garrett had no ankles, so therefore I kind of apologized for it, although it wasn't a horrible performance. But I think I'm back on track this week on an offense that was not on track this past week. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I'm going with the Vikings defense versus the New York Jets over in London. Look, we already know these games in London turn into a soccer fest as it is. I don't know what it's being over there and you think you have to just not score points and kick field goals or what the deal is, but their points are already hard to come by as it is. Weather's usually not very nice. This Vikings defense has been on fire. And let me just add one more caveat that people not think about. Flores has seen this offense about 3 or 4 weeks now straight. He's going to see this offense again coming up. So basically, he's seeing different forms of the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay offense. He's been finely tuning it week by week. He's getting one of the top tier quarterbacks, such as CD Stroud. We saw the trade for that, turning him into getting him a turnover machine. He had Jordan Love turning the ball over. Well, I'm not worried about Aaron Rodgers' low turnovers because I think he's going to be destroyed in the backfield, and you're going to have a low score regardless. This Vikings defense is primed to expose this Jets offense, and I love the Vikings defense for the dominating defense of the week.
Love it. Completely and totally agree with it. I want to follow up real quick because unlike Mike came back and he said, should he accept this trade, Kareem Hunt, and he gets Devon Achane. Yes, that is the deal I would do. And I'm going to use this as a real quick second to talk about Kareem Hunt. Anybody who thinks they're all in on Kareem Hunt, like he's found the fountain of youth, like he's going to be the running back you want to own in Kansas City, I'm here to tell you it's all because Carson Steele fumbled. They just activated Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is going to be a committee mess until Pacheco comes back, who is scheduled to come back before the fantasy football playoffs too, by the way. I want no parts of Kareem Hunt. So yeah, if you can get Devon Achane, I don't care how bad it looked in Miami. If you get Devon Achane for Kareem Hunt, that's a trade you can go ahead and pull, Mike. 100%. All right. So with that, let's move into our next segment on the Rocket Docket, into our offensive observation.
You find me offensive, I find you offensive for finding me offensive.
All right, we're already a quarterly into the season. We have 4 games we get to reflect into. And what I want to talk to you gentlemen about is what some of the breakouts that we were expecting out that come into the season, looking at the numbers from last year going into this year, and where we are standing in our belief scale. Do we believe these guys are still capable of breakouts, or are we starting to lose some of our faith that these guys are going to be the top tier players that we thought or drafted them to be? So the first player, Dan, that you're talking about in this offense in general is a question. After having vintage, quote unquote, Aaron Rodgers 2 weeks ago versus New England Patriots, these New York Jets were able to muster an entire 9 points versus Denver Broncos. Just want to remind everybody that the Denver Broncos, a team that gave 70 points last year to the Miami Dolphins, a team that can't even score any points right now this season, and also a Denver defense that gave up 31 points to a Zach Wilson-led Jets offense. So just to kind of remind people that even the Jets offense could be worse, even with Aaron Rodgers possibly. But one of the breakout guys that we were looking at was supposed to be Breece Hall, arguably number 2, number 3 on most people's board, even some of the top guys' board. Breece Hall is that breakout player. The only thing we're kind of worried about was he going to catch the ball in the backfield? But his offense with Aaron Rodgers, all the weapons, Breece Hall is going to be one of the top tier running backs, explosive running back guy, similar to Devin Achane, who, by the way, is averaging 3.1 yards per carry. But let's look at Breece Hall going in from last year into this year. So Breece Hall in 2023 had 32 rushes, 210 yards. He had 5 catches for 42 yards at this point in the season. He had scored 1 touchdown. This year, he's got 56 rushes, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's got 18 catches on 24 targets, 134 yards, and a touchdown. So, Dan, I'm going to start with you. Is Breece Hall, is he having the breakout that we're expecting? Is it coming, more to be seen? Or is this something that we have to start kind of worrying about? Hey, maybe Breece Hall and this guy, Braylon Allen, who starts some of his touches, might be not the guy that we thought he was this offseason.
Look, first of all, the first question, no, he's not performing at what we would have expected him to be at his ADP as of now, as we go into week 5 after the first quarter of the season's been done. No, I mean, he was drafted, most people either took him as the RB2 or RB3 overall. Most of the time that wound up being pick 2 or somewhere between pick 2 and pick 4 overall in the first round. So no, he's been disappointing from that standpoint. I do think the committee, quote unquote, has been overblown a little bit. He still had 51 snaps. Braylon Allen's 27 last week. The difference has been that offensive line's been not as good as advertised. And I know it's fun to poke fun at the Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets right now because it's just a fun thing for people to do. And I've heard that stat be thrown around the media about, how last year, yes, Zach Wilson, this Jets offense was able to score 31 points in this Denver Bronco defense. In slight defense of the Jets, this is a different Denver Bronco defense. This has actually been one of the most dominant Denver Bronco defenses in the first 4 weeks in the entire league. So I don't want to bury that and act like this is the same defense as of last year because it's really not. Now, let's get into Breece Hall. We know what he's capable of. We know he can be able to turn this around. Morgan Moses has been banged up, and he's a big part of the running game. It's going to be a little rough in the schedule coming up, but it finishes out quite nicely for the New York Jets and for Breece Hall in particular. So, yeah, right now he's got Minnesota coming up. Not a great matchup. You got to be a little bit worried about that, although I still think ultimately you have to start Breece Hall. But then he's got Buffalo, who's given up the most, and even before Derrick Henry came along and put up 200 yards on him, I've been giving up the most rushing yards per play. Okay. Pittsburgh is a little bit tough the following week. Then you get New England's a nice matchup. Houston's in the top 10 in rushing yards per play given up. Arizona after that. Indianapolis has been a train wreck against the run. Seattle is a team you can run on. Miami's been a team you can run on. Jacksonville, Los Angeles, and then you finish out again with Buffalo. So once you get past Pittsburgh in week 7, it lines up very nicely for Breece Hall to have a second half run here and can really come on back. So for me, I'm not worried about Breece Hall.
All right. Adam, let's go to his teammate, Garrett Wilson, the guy that a lot of us thought could have that breakout. We're just waiting for him to finally get that quarterback that he's been waiting for. A lot of people had him as one of the top 2 receivers, and that after those, the big guys, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chases. But right now, Garrett Wilson last year had 21 catches, 225 yards, and 36 targets. He had 2 touchdowns. This year, he's got 20 catches, 34 targets, 191 yards, and 1 touchdown. So stats aren't all that different. Is Garrett Wilson is this what we have as Garrett Wilson, or are we expecting more, or is it time to get kind of panicky with Garrett Wilson moving forward?
I do have concerns about him with Aaron Rodgers, especially if Devontae Adams does indeed come into the fray. Look, he I do think that Devontae Adams would out-target him, at least for the time being, the immediate future. I'm not off of Garrett Wilson, the talent. He doesn't look any different. He's still separating. He can still make good plays, and it's not like, he looks necessarily bad. It just, look, Aaron Rodgers has always been a kind of weird guy where if you put him on the field with his friends, he's going to throw the ball to his friends. It was that way with Randall Cobb towards the end of there in periods where for no reason, he was there because Aaron wanted him to be there, right? He likes Allen Lazard. He's always, for whatever messed up reason in his mind, I mean, when Devontae left, he was a big believer that Allen Lazard was, one of the best receivers in this game. And I don't agree. I don't think many people do. But Aaron has the ball in his hands, and that's what he believes. So I would be concerned for the time being. I don't think the talent is gone. So, as a football fan, as a dynasty player, I'm not afraid of Garrett Wilson moving forward. But if I drafted him at his higher cost moving into this season because of the Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers upgrade, yeah, I do think there's real cause for concern, especially again with the Devontae Adams rumors, because while sure, I think he should get closer to Aaron Rodgers and past Allen Lazard by season's end, Devontae Adams might be a bigger problem.
Let me ask you real quick, with the Aaron Rodgers thing. If we're looking at Garrett Wilson from this year to last year, the yards are very similar, but the yards per catch are actually a bit lower. So is this an offense thing, or is this a comfort thing with Aaron Rodgers? Because I think that's what we keep talking about, the Aaron Rodgers narrative. But this is what we've seen in this offense for 2 years after 4 weeks. So is this just the usage versus it's a matter of him and Aaron Rodgers being on the same page, in your opinion?
I think it's a mix of both, for sure. I mean, I think we've all been on the same page that this is not the most exciting offensive scheme on the planet, to say the least. It's far from the best coached unit in the league. As well as kind of to Dan's point with Breece Hall, this offensive line has been amongst the bottom half for sure so far this season. So, that when your tackles are just letting people by, that average depth of target is going to come down a little bit as well. So I do think it's a combination of factors. Again, like the play calling could be a lot better. The offensive line plays a factor, and then the Aaron Rodgers, he plays a factor. So I do think it's all of the above.
Chris, before you move on, we got to bang out a few questions because our chat kind of here is popping up. Absolutely love it, guys. So unlike Mike comes back, he wants to ask Kyler versus the 49ers or Baker versus the Falcons. For me, I always take Kyler with the rushing over that. Plus, remember, Fred Warner may or may not play. That could actually significantly impact Kyler as well. Anybody disagree with that?
I like Baker.
You like Baker against the Falcons. Falcons have been...
We talked about this off air. I think Kyler Murray is going to get murdered by this 49er front four. I think the offensive line for Arizona is putrid. I think Arizona's overrated offensively in general. I think Kyler Murray is going to get exposed this week and not have a good week. That's my personal take.
All right. I disagree. I have Kyler Murray as a QB5. He has a base floor with his rushing, and the Falcons are no pushover for a matchup. I mean, they're only giving up the 18th most points to the quarterbacks right now. They're I believe they're 7th right now in passing yards per play given up. They're tied for 5th in the least amount of touchdowns given up. So this is not a great matchup here. I do have Baker, by the way, FYI, as my QB9. So I do have him as a starter. It's not a wide gap here, but I still rather have the floor of Kyler. So take that as what you will. Adam, help me out with this one. Brett, hey guys, do I drop QJ, Quentin Johnston, for Trey Tucker?
I would tend to, yeah. Look, I think kind of no matter which way this goes, do I think Quentin Johnston's the better player? He looks much improved this season, probably. But neither of these passing offenses are going to throw a ton. I just have more questions about the Chargers in terms of volume, just because game script's not going to favor the Raiders very often this season, especially with how abysmal their secondary looks. And they've only been able to run in one game so far. So on the whole, I think that sheer volume, Trey Tucker could be serviceable versus Quentin Johnston. He's going to have his moments. He's going to have those touchdowns. And I think later in the season, maybe this passing offense gets a little more interesting. But guessing those games for the time being is just not something I want to take part in.
Okay. I tend to agree with you on that one. Let's go to Z Money. I traded Achan and Mostert for Puka, Worthy, and Bucky. What do you guys think about that, Chris?
I think that's a pretty good move. Look, I think A-Chain has a lot of upside, but like I talked about earlier, he's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. This Miami offense has done nothing. You're hoping that when Tua comes back, I could do something. But Dan, talked about. It's not a guarantee he'll be through the whole season. Bucky Irving is a guy who's possibly getting more and more touches and could be the RB1 Tampa Bay. Worthy has nothing but upside in Kansas City offense with the Rashid Rice injury, and Puka is a guy that you can get back. Just it'd be a big time guy for you in the playoff stretch. So I like that trade.
Okay, I like this. And Chase chimed in on this next trade question we had. T-Money, 1-3 guy just offered me Gibbs and Devonta Smith for DK Metcalf and James Conner. And he's asking if we would take that. Chase answered with that he would take or keep, in this case, I guess, DK Metcalf and James Conner. And so that's right. He's chiming in on it during our family function. We love it, Chase. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. You guys agree with Chase? Would you stick with DK Metcalf and James Conner over Jahmyr Gibbs and Devonta Smith, who are both on buys this week? And he's 1-3.
That's tough. I like the upside it gives throughout the season versus like Connor's, throughout the season progression and how that's going to unfold. That's a tough one for me, Dan. But I think I'd hold serve for right now.
Adam,
I'm holding. I'm not a big Devonta Smith guy as far as the upside, and it would be really nice to get Gibbs, but I'm not necessarily. I don't think it's worth the gap at wide receiver.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Gibbs makes it tough. This guy also has J-Mo on his team already, so he does have some ties already to the Detroit Lions offense. Of course, they wouldn't have a bye after this week, which could be nice. But I'm with you. See, the problem is there's too much more of a gap between DK and Devonta as far as their upside is concerned than Gibbs and Connor, with Connor being a touchdown maker in his own right. Okay, so with that, Chris, we can kick it back to you as we kind of pounded out these questions here. Go ahead.
All right, so continuing talking about some of these guys that we expect to be breakouts that maybe are on their way, or maybe we're having some questions about. Dan Bijan Robinson, Dan's RB1 going into the season. He kind of, tongue in cheek in a sense. He acknowledged Christian McCaffrey, as we all did, was probably the best guy. But Bijan Robinson, a guy we're all very high on, an offense that's looked revolutionized. Arthur Smith no longer going to hold him back. He's going to unleash him. So we look at the stats and see how this unfolded and then what we're looking at moving forward. Bijan last year had 53 carries for 318 yards at this point. He had 19 catches for 134 yards and receiving and another touchdown. So far this season, he's got 55 carries, similar to last year, 224 yards, so yardage is down, 1 touchdown rushing versus Lear last year, and 135 receiving yards, which is very similar to last year, but has 4 less catches. So has Bijan Robinson been freed from Arthur Smith and now going to be the guy that we wanted him to be coming out of college and that stud RB? Or are we a little bit worried that maybe the Robinson or something else in the land might not be quite the elixir that we thought it was?
Yeah, there's been a couple of weeks now where I've been almost questioning if Arthur Smith is still coaching the Atlanta Falcons or not, quite frankly. It's been brutal, okay? It has not gone the way we hoped it would. The first 2 weeks seemed okay. Bijan was getting his touches. He was being efficient. And then the last couple of weeks, what's happened is you look at Tyler Algier and the way he's being utilized versus the way Bijan Robinson's being utilized. First of all, that gap's way too close. I know Tyler Algier, he's no slouch. This is not a slight against Tyler Algier. He's a good, solid running back, but he's not the special talent that Bijan Robinson is. And you're coming from a coaching system that had just utilized Kyron Williams the way they did. You're hoping they do something similar for Bijan. He would be able to take that leap as a result. That's not panning out right now. I don't know if it necessarily does. Now, am I overreacting to what happened this past week? No. There's a lot of qualifiers from this past week that I don't think the gap's going to be quite as tight as it was between him and Algier. A couple of things. One, he was coming in with a little bit of a shoulder bang up, and then we found out that maybe he had some hamstring soreness during the game. So that was kind of an explainer as far as how the second half went while Tyler Algier got as many touches as he did. Also, they said they had in the back of their minds that they had a Thursday night game coming up. We've actually seen a pattern a little bit over the past 3 weeks in the Thursday night games of the running backs of those teams having a little bit less work the Sunday previous when they have a Thursday game coming up. So that's a trend that I think we have to continue to watch here. But what I've been upset about from the scheme standpoint is the way in which they choose to run these guys. Bijan is getting the ball 1st and 10, run. 2nd and 10, run. When everyone and their mom is expecting it. In fact, he's getting the overwhelming bulk of the work when the Falcons are facing stacked boxes. 3% of the time. 3% of the time when they're facing a stacked box, Algier's getting the ball. So that tells you he's going against lighter boxes. He's getting, I think it is 3.65 yards before contact. Oh, I'm sorry, that's too high. 3.55 yards before contact. So 3.5 yards, he's not getting touched on his carries per attempt. Bijan's is at 2.02. And that's more of how they're running him, what situations they're running him in. The only two positives that I can take from you. Bijan's still clearly the favorite as far as the passing game is concerned, and that is what's keeping him afloat, especially in half-point and full-point PPR leagues. The other part is that so far, although it hasn't been many opportunities, but Bijan has had 100% of the inside the 5 carries for the team at this point. Again, hasn't been many opportunities because this Falcons offense is not taking off the way we're hoping to. So it's been a little bit rough. Do I think he comes back and gives us the ADP that we drafted him at? Unless something happens to Tyler Algier, I'm starting to think maybe not. Do I think this gets better than what it is and he still finishes as a top 12 running back? Yes. Yes, I do. Because I do think this Falcons offense is going to continue to get better. Remember, there's still a lot of new pieces, and Cousins still doesn't look like he's quite comfortable. But after this week against Tampa Bay, who, by the way, we're going to get into this a little bit with Bijan later on. I have some prop bets for you. But after this week against Tampa Bay, they do have Carolina, they have Seattle, Tampa Bay again, Dallas. So you have a handful of good matchups in that little streak. Gets a little rough there with the Saints in Denver before he goes on bye in week 12. Comes out with the Chargers in Minnesota. So also comes out rough after the bye. But then he has Vegas, he has the Giants, and he has Washington. Bijan has one of the best playoff matchups you could possibly have. So you're sitting there with Bijan on your team in the playoff time. He might win you a championship. So that's why I'm not bailing on that just yet.
All right. Well, Adam, I'm going to go to you, a guy that you and I have loved, his teammate Drake London coming out, a guy that we've been waiting for to break out. We are also excited about the freedom from Arthur Smith. So far this last season, we had 11 catches for 22 targets, 126 yards, 2 touchdowns. This season, we've gotten 20 catches on 31 targets, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So are we getting our breakout we're expecting? Is this as good as it's going to get? Should it improve? Or are we a little bit worried that Drake London isn't still going to be the breakout guy that we hoped he was going to be?
I'd say of these guys, I think he's the one that I'm maybe most optimistic about actually, still getting there. I don't think that a true breakout is necessarily coming, right? I don't think he's going to be the star that you or I maybe thought he was going to be this year. But I do think that he's going to move in the right direction just because he does have real involvement. And I do think there's reason to believe this passing offense is going to get a little bit better the further we get away from Kirk Cousins' injury. Do I think it's going to be a ton better? No. Do I think he's going to be as involved as maybe I think he should be? No. And for those reasons, I don't think he's going to get the breakout necessarily that he was being drafted for, or the breakout that, again, I would have liked to see. But I do think that you'll see him move in a better direction than, his current averages, his current pace.
All right. And I want to kind of go down that way with our question, the thing, any hope for Pittman? And this kind of goes to the question I have, and I'll go to both of you for this one. A guy that everybody had as their top mobile quarterback on the board for the most part, a guy that we were just waiting and salivating for once he gets healthy and back out there. Look what he did last year. What can he do this year? Anthony Richardson at this point last year had 50 completions on 84 attempts for 577 yards, 3 touchdowns passing with 1 interception. He had 25 carries for 136 yards and 4 touchdowns. So far this year, he had 39 completions on 77 attempts, 654 yards, 3 touchdowns again, but 6 interceptions, 21 carries, a $141, and 1 rushing touchdown. So rushing touchdowns a little bit lower than they were last year. Rushing yards about the same, passing yards close to the same, completion percentage a little bit down. Adam, Dan, is Anthony Richardson, is this our breakout? Is this something we're getting a little bit cautious about that we're not going to get? Because, it's supposed to be the cheat code, the rushing guy. So is Anthony Richardson the guy that I want to have as my top mobile quarterback moving forward this season?
I mean, I think you can clearly answer that last question and say no, because Jaden Daniels is going to be your top rushing quarterback this season. I don't think that's up for debate anymore. It's him and Josh Allen and pretty much nobody else.
Lamar is actually top rusher right now.
Those 3 are in that conversation, and Richardson's not. It's those 3. But I do think you're going to see an uptick in the rushing touchdowns. I think the red zone usage has been a little bit weird. And in those few plays, unfortunate plays this past week, you did see they were a little bit more willing to lean on his ability to run rather than just trying to have him heave the ball. So do I think that necessarily the passing woes are going to go away? No. Do I think that, maybe there's a regression to the mean a little bit there? Sure. I don't think he's going to throw 2 picks a game all season, but do I think he's going to be an ineffective passer all season? Yes, I do think that will continue to be the case. But I think the red zone utilization has been a little bit weird when they do get there. They've tried to do a bunch of weird pass stuff, and it's been going in the right direction there. Now, whether those go to Jonathan Taylor or him, I think is up for debate. But I think that from a fantasy perspective, you could see it improve. I don't know that the on the field really improves.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of that real quick. I mean, look, I wasn't as big on Anthony Richardson as most. I still had him in my top 7, but I had guys like Kyler Murray in front of him that most people were not. I didn't draft Anthony Richardson in any of my redraft leagues because, as I pointed out to everybody, there's no point in drafting Anthony Richardson in the 5th round when you could get Jaden Daniels in the 9th round. But on the same token, I kind of agree with Adam as far as regression need. It will kind of come back a little bit. This is still a very athletic quarterback. And right now, while Richardson's not a good passing quarterback, and I never thought he was, and that's why I kind of questioned, in Dynasty at least, what his NFL career was going to be. This is on Shane Steichen a little bit. Because why in the first couple of weeks he wouldn't build this team around Jonathan Taylor and RPO action befuddled my mind. Completely befuddled my mind. Because this offense, if you're going to have Anthony Richardson be the quarterback, it needs to be built around Jonathan Taylor and Richardson's ability to be a dual threat quarterback off of that, not the other way around. And he was trying to have it be Richardson first and not Jonathan Taylor. Now, of course, finally, he gives the ball up to Jonathan Taylor the last 2 weeks, and Taylor gets a little ankle injury, but he'll be okay in the long run. I do lay a lot of this from a fantasy perspective with the Richardson woes at Shane Steichen's feet for not running this offense the way that he should be. So I'll throw that out there.
I agree.
All right. So good points. So we're looking at, fantasy-wise, is this guy still the guy that we love? And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, and we're going to have to cut my time a little short, but I don't want to get too much of my spiel. I wanted to bring up the QBS is what I was going to call it. And there's a lot of discussions that we're hearing about quarterbacks out there that I don't necessarily always buy the rhetoric that people are saying. And this is one of the things. I'm not saying that these guys aren't as good or these guys can't be good. I'm saying look at the numbers, question yourself before you start jumping to conclusions. You talk about Jaden Daniels, Adam is the guy that is the rushing guy who's going to be, that guy. He has 4 rushing touchdowns. He's got 46 carries for 200-something yards. But one of the biggest differences is he had almost, 15 more carries than Richardson had at this point last year. But the touchdowns were the same. Its yards per carry are very similar. It's not like he's averaging 8 yards per carry or 10 yards per carry. He's averaging about 4.5, 5 yards a carry. I bring that number up because this is how things can get limited and change real quickly when guys aren't completing passes, Dan, as you talked about. Everybody thinks Jaden Daniels is, this guru, is such an incredible guy. I'm not saying he can't be because of his completion percentage. 81%. It's incredible. It's immaculate. as I brought up earlier in this little spiel, Aaron Rodgers was coming off vintage Aaron Rodgers versus New England Patriots, 27 for 33, I think it was, 281 yards. We were all impressed because he threw the ball over and over again to Braylon Allen and Hall. It wasn't Wilson. It wasn't the receivers. It wasn't down the field. It was one big throw down to Lazard down the field, and they're like, woohoo, look at that. And we anointed him like, look, he's back. And the next week, we watched him go out and lay an egg and have 9 whole points. We watched Jaden Daniels getting away with throwing the ball over and over again to his running backs. It's been very efficient. They haven't had to punt the ball. It's been incredible. But I just want to remind people, this isn't the first time we saw this. And this isn't the first time with this coaching staff that we've seen guys with high completion percentages. Guys remember a guy named Colt McCoy? Colt McCoy played with our coaching staff that we're just loving because Kingsbury has it all figured out. He's the newest guru now, back on track again. Seeing a lot of things I saw from the first time I saw Kingsbury come around. At 2021, in the 3 games that started, which is, I'm comparing to Jaden Daniels, he also had a 75.5% completion percentage. He had 3 passing touchdowns and 1 interception. Same touchdowns, same interception ratio. Now, they only have 14 carries for 40 yards. So there's the big difference, you might think to yourself. But also, I can't give Kingsbury all the credit either. Colt McCoy in 2014, his rookie year, had a 4-game stretch where he also completed 72% of his passes. He had 4 touchdowns, and he rushed for 42 yards and rushed for a touchdown. I bring that up because it's the same numbers, basically, that he had in the same stretch with the coaching staff in Washington, which, by the way, was Kyle Shanahan, who was offensive coordinator at the time. But it was a dink and dunk system predicated on checking the ball to the running back and 4 and 5 yard passes. It's going to be a high completion percentage. When teams take that away and make you read the field, you're going to have to see what the guy progresses as a thrower. I'm not saying this guy can or can't be a good thrower, but what I see more of is a Justin Fields, who this league and these people in the fantasy industry wanted to just, torpedo as fast as they possibly could, that he can't complete percentages passes. He's inaccurate. Who's completing 61% of his passes, by the way, because he's throwing to the running backs and throwing short passes more often, similar to Jaden Daniels, and using his legs with a more effective rate, actually, and more explosive rate than Jaden Daniels had. So Justin Fields, a guy who are basically, we didn't want to trade for, nobody wanted to even give him any money, had no chance to start anywhere. But Jaden Daniels is now the starter. Washington has it all figured out. That's their answer quarterback, no questions asked. Not saying, well, it won't happen, just saying before we anoint people, just think about some of the things out there before you just want to point to numbers or point to this or point to that. Because don't forget, Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, had a 4-game stretch his rookie year where he had 11 touchdown passes and 1 interception at this point in the season, and also had a 75% completion percentage. So it's not only something that you can do just because we all hate Danny Dimes now. Dan, I'm done.
No, you're all good. You had to get that off your chest. The good stat for you right now is that of 33 qualifying quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels is 32nd. The only person behind him is Anthony Richardson as far as on-target throws. So the 81% completion percentage is a little bit skewed. However, for fantasy purposes, it's been fantastic. So let's hope it keeps going that way. All right, so what I want to do is hit the little big-time prop bets, and then we'll get to Adam's Dynasty Check. All right, it's going to be a little rapid fire for you guys to be able to cash your tickets. And we've been pretty successful at this, especially over the past few weeks. So right back up again. We hit with Brock Purdy last week. We're going to go right back to him again this week. This time I want over 1.5 passing touchdowns out of Brock Purdy. He's played well despite the volatility around him with all of the injuries. He's averaged 2 touchdowns per game versus Arizona. And Arizona's tied for the second most passing touchdowns allowed so far this season. So give me Brock Purdy over 1.5 passing touchdowns this week. Bijan Robinson, I told you we talk about him. I like him over 24.5 receiving yards. Yes, I know we talked about it. There's been some frustration with Bijan and this Falcons offense in general from a fantasy perspective, but he's still been the favorite target out of the backfield. He has gone over that 24.5 mark 3 of the last 4 games, and the Buccaneers have allowed the second most receiving yards to the running back so far this season. So I do like him over 24.5 this Thursday. Bucky Irving, going back to the Thursday night game, I like him over 1.5 receptions. Look, he's been over this mark actually 2 of the last 3 games secretly, and Rachaad White seems like he's falling further and further down. Now, I do think overall, long term, he still has a stranglehold over the passing game, but ultimately last week, Bucky Irving only had 4 less routes run than Rachaad White, so this might be getting a hell of a lot closer than any of us expected. So I like Bucky Irving over 1.5 receptions. And with that, we go to Dynasty Temperature.
So hot in here.
Welcome to the Dynasty Temperature Check. We're gonna change it up a little bit, look a little bit, further down the future, and with Dynasty, and see what some of these guys are worth, what they're trading for, and ultimately where we feel the market is going. So Dan, I'm gonna go to you first, and that's gonna be for Buccaneers running back Bucky Irving, who is at the time that I pulled the numbers, I think it shifted a little bit, but 3rd most traded player overall, 2nd most traded running back on Keep Trade Cut. He was up 25 spots over the last month. He's been making a massive name for himself. Kind of playing, candidly much better than Rachaad White at the same position there in Tampa Bay. He's up to the running back 19 on Keep Trade Cut, and the ECR this week has him as the running back 26. Some potential moves for him I've pulled out of the database are around 2 pick in 2025, so this upcoming Dynasty rookie draft, James Conner, Sam Darnold, or Khalil Shakir. So Dan, what do you think about that based on that value, kind of where you see him and where things are going?
So look, it's clear right now for redraft purposes that Bucky Irving may be overtaking Rachaad White before too long. Now remember, we're doing this is the Dynasty temperature check. So we're doing this from a Dynasty perspective. I can't get over my pre-draft analysis on Bucky Irving. I was not a big fan. There's a lot of statistics, especially a 4.55 yard dash, a guy who's less than 200 pounds at 5'9". Didn't like his wiggle necessarily in Oregon on an NFL scale. I'm not overly impressed with Bucky Irving's profile. He has impressed me, or played better at least than I thought he would so far in the first 4 weeks of the year. But overall, I don't think he's the answer long term. And you can get some of these players that you're listing here, like James Conner, like Sam Darnold, especially if you're, a lot of these dynasty leagues or in super flex leagues. I don't know about Khalil Shakir. I think I would keep Bucky Irving over Khalil Shakir. But for the most part, abandon ship. If you can get something of decent value, I don't like Bucky Irving for the long term. I don't know if he's a long-term value here.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think he's, in a lot of senses, what people talked about Kyron, where it's like, he's just a low-pick running back, so he's going to lose his job suddenly when someone else gets drafted higher. He's immediately going to, versus Kyron, I think is a much better player. But I do think he is a better fit for that narrative about the low-drafted running back that, could be moved on from at will because he doesn't actually cost that much and there's no real repercussions. But to your point for redraft, I do think there's value there. On to the next player that is a player who I have loved for a long time. We've talked about on this show, that's Deontay Johnson, lighting it up with Andy Dalton, who we talked about, I believe, last week, if not the week prior. 7th most traded at the time of me pulling the data, 2nd most at the wide receiver position, and Keep Trade Cut over the last month. He's up 5 spots to wide receiver 39. On the ECR this week, he is wide receiver 15. Seeing in a generally similar range, round 2, Rashee Rice, which is an interesting one, but this is, the day after the injury, I believe, that one happened. Andy Dalton, Kyle Pitts. So at that valuation, Chris, what's your thoughts on Deontay Johnson and his value and where he's going?
Adam, can you tell me Bryce Young definitely will not be the quarterback for him in Carolina if he returns there next year? Because that would dictate a whole lot for me. Now, look, I think this is a guy that, for what you just talked about, I think is definitely worth the value. I think Deontay Johnson's a hugely forgotten about guy who's one of the top separators for the last 5-6 years now. This isn't just like a one-trick pony. It's a guy who gets separation consistently, that usually ages well as well. A guy who could play in the slot as he gets a little bit older. A guy who will be a free agent at the end of this year. So if he's not in Carolina, it's going to be somewhere else. And I think anything which you got excited about with Andy Dalton, you saw since the last time he had Brendan, basically Roethlisberger throwing the ball. If he has just a semi-decent quarterback throwing the ball, what he can put up and do for you. So I think Deontay Johnson's a steal. I think he's going to be a guy who's featured a lot in this offense for the rest of the season as well.
I like it. Yeah, I definitely agree. He's always drawn targets, and I think at a certain point that just has to matter a little bit. I'm going to kick this to both of you guys briefly because I think it's going to be divisive. I think it's an incredibly interesting player to talk about, especially from a dynasty perspective. That's Travis Kelce. He was the 20th most traded player, so not crazy much, but the tight end position has not seen a lot of volatility, a lot of movement, so that actually makes him the most traded tight end. So 20th traded player, most traded tight end. Down 3 spots on Keep Trade Cut. In the Keep Trade Cuts dynasty rankings, he's down to tight end 10. Down those 3 spots over the last month. On the ECR, however, he is still the tight end 1, which I think candidly has more to do with everyone dying around him on the Kansas City pass catching group and the relative woes at the tight end position on the whole throughout the league. But at any rate, he's gone for players like Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, a second-round dynasty pick, things of that nature. What are your thoughts when it comes to Travis Kelce? Dan, you want to kick us off?
Bye.
Yeah, if you can trade Mark Andrews and get Travis Kelce, do it. Mark Andrews looks like he's the one aging out faster than Travis Kelce is. Look, it kind of depends to some degree where you're at in your dynasty league, right? If you're competing this year, Adam, your point you laid out because of what's happened now, Marquise Brown out the regular season, Rashee Rice, which by the way is a little bit interesting because they haven't actually told us officially what the injury was. We're expecting it to be an ACL or some sort of ligament tear, but they actually haven't said that. I'm going to be talking to Dr. Brian Scott tomorrow at 8:00 if you guys tune in at Fantasy Football Advice Network about that to see kind of what he thinks, unless they come out and finally officially say it tomorrow. We'll see. Recording this on Wednesday night. But if you're in a position to win now, and likely, if you have Travis Kelce, you're probably in that position. I'm holding him or I'm buying him for either Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts. There's no way. Rashee, he's needed now. He is the target of the middle of the field. It's not going to be with Rice gone. It's not going to be anybody else. Xavier Worthy's there to spread the field on the outside. We know Juju Smith-Schuster's a bum. We know Justin Watson's nothing more than a backup wide receiver. This just saved, in some ways, Travis Kelce's season. I think he's got one more great season left in him, especially now with the opportunity. Now, if you're in a situation where your team's not set up to win now, then this is a great opportunity to sell Kelce high. But I'm not selling him for Andrews. I'm not selling him for Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, by the way, unless he moves on from Atlanta at this point, I'm just convinced that he's never going to be able to do anything. I don't even know what to make of it. But yeah, Travis Kelce, I actually want him, not get rid of him.
Chris, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, we didn't get into tight ends because we had to speed up through our thing. But yes, Kyle Pitts is a guy that's been a little bit frustrating. Adam, for me, it's a little bit in between. Look, I think the days of Travis Kelce dominating might be over, Dan. I wanted it to be the case, but I watched this offense the last 2 years, and I wonder if they know how to be explosive anymore because it just seems like they don't. And I know that I was very excited by the playmakers they added. I think Xavier Worthy will still be a playmaker that helps this offense still stretch the field and can open up things. But unless they get Matt Nagy away from this offense and that whatever stench he's bringing to it and let a little creativity get back into this offense, they've been stagnant. They've been boring. You can read different articles about the Chiefs have been doing. It has not been – they're not the leading offense anymore. They're not the offense that you're trying to copy or want to be like. They're the offense that you look like in the New York Jets. So I think this is something that needs to be questioned and start looking at, do we want Patrick Mahomes being kept in check down, or can we figure out how to be more explosive? With that said, Travis Kelce is still one of the guys that you want to own a tight end position, so I'm not giving him away. If I want to add him in a position where I want to upgrade, I'm going to try to get some draft capital. I'm not going to sell him now, Danny, either, because I think there could be more value, as you alluded to. I'm going to wait till I have some couple of big weeks, and then I want to sell Travis Kelce if I'm going to try to move him for some picks or something. But I'm definitely not flipping him for equal tight ends. There's nobody else doing anything right now until you see this tight end position kind of excel one way or another. Hold pat, and you're the best guy in your hand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Rice goes down. Kelce gets 7 catches for 89 yards. That's a freaking godsend at the tight end position right now after it was supposed to be a strength this year in fantasy football. It's just been dreadful.
Yeah, definitely agree there.
All right, so that wraps it up for you, right, Adam? So we can go to our last segment, Crush or Bust.
And I'll crush you like a paper cup.
So this is where we get into our favorite starts and our not so favorite sits into this one. So Adam, let's start with you on the bust side because you're going to piss me off with this one, buddy. But go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it's Chris Olave. It's just the matchup. This offensive line is tough. Losing their center has been awful for them. And that matchup with Chris Jones is a little scary. Derek Carr is under 50% completion percentage under pressure. His overall rating is actually fairly good, but it's because early on in the season he was just lighting the world on fire, right? The last couple weeks. Less so. Now, last week he played really well, but the box stats weren't necessarily insane. Point being, Chris Jones versus his backup center is just not a matchup that I'm excited for. I think the ADOT from him is going to be really low, and I think that this passing offense might struggle to get going. This might be a stinker of a game while both teams are kind of trying to figure out, due to injuries, how to change their offenses from what they thought they had at the beginning of the season to their new reality now that they've had some very difficult injuries to deal with. Saints are a little bit further along in that process, and I don't think that Olave, necessarily duds out. But again, this is just a touch matchup for a team that, by the way, the Chiefs' overall pass rush and secondary is very good as well. It's not just that matchup, but that is the scariest portion of it.
Yeah, look, I get where you're coming from. It is a tough matchup against Kansas City. We're also talking about a guy who's been 80 yards plus over the last 3 weeks. Last week, he was supposed to come into a hamstring injury. We didn't even know he was going to play. Winds up getting 10 targets, 8 receptions, 87 yards against a no-slouch secondary in the Atlanta Falcons. I think you're still probably playing Chris Olave, but yeah, you're not expecting a ceiling game, a bust-out game, or by any stretch of the means. So I'm with you on that one.
I'll say this. I'm not necessarily auto-benching him, I think, but he's not in my top 24. I think the 16 ECR is ridiculous. I think he's a high-end flex play. So I don't think he's coming out of lineups, but...
Oh, man. We got a question coming in here from Derek real quick. Start Gibson or Justice Hill in a full-point PPR this week. Chris, what do you think?
For me, it's Gibson. I love the matchup versus the Dolphins. This Dolphins offense can't score any points. They can't do anything in general. New England's going to try to do anything it can do to score points, including use more Antonio Gibson. You throw him involved in the passing attack. I know Justice Hill's guy, we're excited about the PPR game, but you're playing Cincinnati. Look like I happened last week with the Washington team. All you had to do was hand the ball over and over again to the running backs. McNichols had 2 touchdowns. Robinson ran all over them. Why would they do anything different? With Lamar Jackson doing nothing but having to hand the ball off, basically, I don't think Justice Hill really being needed in this game. So I'm going to go with Gibson.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So Chase, his bust, to show you guys know, was Patrick Mahomes. Going back to that Monday night game, kind of in line with Adam's theory that game in general might be a stinker. Look, he acknowledges that, yeah, you're probably not in a position to bench him necessarily, but the Saints are allowing the third fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. And Mahomes, look, I'll say this. Mahomes hasn't been a good fantasy start in like 2 years. Kind of Chris's point at this point. It hasn't really been great for a fantasy standpoint. I have Patrick Mahomes as my QB 14. So I'm kind of with Chase on this one. I don't have him as a top 12 must play either. I'm looking to bench him. And, just to get a little dig at me, because of my personal hatred for Baker Mayfield, thinking he's overrated. And by the way, from an NFL standpoint, he is overrated. But I'm also with Chase on this page for this week. I do have him as QB9. So, yeah, I have him right ahead of Patrick Mahomes. I would play Baker over Patrick Mahomes this particular week as well. No doubt about it. So, Chris, who's your bust?
Yeah, this guy's not necessarily a bust to me, Dan, but it's a guy that ECR-wise I think is a little too high. I think that people are, loving what they saw last year. That's Nico Collins. Look, Nico Collins was fantastic, and I had to eat some crow. Nico Collins being one of the best receivers for this Texas offense. Having said that, you're going against a Buffalo team that, despite getting blown out last week, has not giving up any yards to that receiver one. They shut down receiver ones for the last 2 years almost, basically. I don't know how they do it. They do it with fumes, different guys, but they play very soft zones, but they somehow, some way make sure that receiver one does not go off. You have Tank Dell could be possibly back. You have Joe Mixon possibly be back. A lot of other mouths that could be fed in this offense. Nico Collins was fantastic. I think he's still going to start him. But I think you're going to look more like seeing that 4 catch, 10 target game where the 81 yards previous week than last week's 190 something yard blowout and 2 touchdowns. So just saying Nico Collins is not a receiver one for me as ECR has him this week.
But you're playing him, right?
I think he's definitely a play. I just think you want to make sure that you're not depending on him to be this guy who's going to be like, this top tier receiver. You might want to look for a little upside, maybe in your flex or somewhere other position.
You're not wrong in the sense that this is not the greatest matchup in the world. I mean, the Buffalo Bills are literally third in yards per pass play given up right now. Like, you can run the ball on the Bills, passing on them, maybe not so much. And if Joe Mixon is back, although I am a little bit alarmed by the fact that he didn't practice on a Wednesday when he was supposed to be getting pretty close last week. We'll see if that actually amounts to anything or not tomorrow when I talk to Dr. Brian Scott. Nico Collins has been the best receiver in football right now. So he's in my top 5. I can't take him out of my top 5 right now. He's been playing too well against other tough matchups. He's been the number 1 target for CJ Stroud. He's in my top 5. There's no way he's not a wide receiver 1 until further notice at this point, frankly. So I would disagree with that standpoint, but do point out that is not a great matchup. So maybe he doesn't have the wide receiver 1 overall that he's been the last few weeks. Let's switch gears. Let's go to Crush. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to take my bust. My bad. So my bust for this week actually is Drake London. And it's kind of in a similar vein of the way Olave is Adams' bust, right? I don't have my top 24. Now, if you play in 3 receiver sets, if you play flex, he might still be in that conversation because I still have him as wide receiver 26. But ECR's got him at wide receiver 13. Not really sure why. I don't know what about this Atlanta Falcon offense has been all that impressive. Now, the opportunities have been there, right? He's got the 12th highest target share rate. He's been 3rd in first read percentage, which allows me to believe, again, kind of like the Bijan thing, that this situation will improve as the season goes on. But I'm not big on it for this particular week. He's been the wide receiver 29 in average points per game over the past 4 weeks. So he's been a wide receiver 3 as it is. He's only 38th in fantasy points per route run. He's been 60th in yards per route run, 69th in yards per target, which has been the real pathetic part of it all because he's only getting targeted pretty much 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. I exaggerate, of course, but that's what it feels like. And on top of it, he's facing a Bucs team that's allowed only the 7th least, fantasy points to wide receivers. The 7th least amount of passing yards per play. The 11th least expected points added per pass. It's not a great matchup for Drake London on top of the woes that the Atlanta Falcons offense has been seeing. So I am not big on Drake London this week, more as a wide receiver 3. With that, let's go to the guys that we actually love. Let's end this thing on a positive note. Adam, who do you love this week? Who do you have a crush on?
I got to say it. I am buying into Portland Sutton this week. Not only this week, he's actually a buy candidate for me. Look, we're talking about a guy who is 7th in targets so far this season. He has not necessarily realized a ton of that, and I get that. But he's played 4 of the best defenses so far this year. Look, Seattle's defense, I think, is legitimately good despite what happened to Detroit. I'm sorry that their offense is strong. All right, when they're on, and it is what it is. Outside of that, we can even toss that game aside. Sure, fine. Seattle is, even if their defense is the worst in the league, which they're not, and we're going to get to that matchup here in a moment. Steelers, objectively, very, very good defense. I don't think there's any argument against that. Jets, objectively, very, very good secondary. I don't think there's any argument against that. They've had a tough time so far. And it's a rookie quarterback. He's played some of the best secondaries in the league, best pass rushes in the league so far. And now he's going against a secondary that is very similar to the secondaries he was playing on Saturdays. I'm sorry, this Raiders secondary is bad. First of all, minor tangent, Browns fans victory lapping Watson's performance this past week can stop it. I know that was like their silver lining, like, oh, but at least Deshaun Watson played well. This is a college defense. It is. Their pass rush is good. The run defense is good. This secondary is college level. It should be playing on Saturdays genuinely. None of their secondary players should belong in the NFL at this point. So let's leave that. Come back to Courtland Sutton on the whole has been playing well. He's been doing his thing. He's generating targets. Bo Nix, not so much, but this is a very good pass blocking offensive line so far this season, and I think you can bank on the pass blocking offensive line, keeping him upright. They're throwing the ball a crap ton. Look, Bo Nix might not be a good passer or, the steady hand that, maybe you would hope. He's going to throw the ball, and he's going to throw the ball to Courtland Sutton, and he's going to do so unpressured a decent amount of the time. I think that combination, when you're talking about a secondary that, again, is on a Saturday level, I think you can get away with it. And their schedule on the whole gets a whole lot easier for them in that regard, moving down the season, which is why I think that this is a potentially, good opportunity to get into Courtland Sutton on the whole. I mean, you don't see many guys in the top 15 most targeted players who are, as low in fantasy points per game. I think you're going to see a positive regression there, if nothing else. I mean, that many targets, those few fantasy points really doesn't happen on a large sample size almost ever.
I got to ask you this. Would you play Courtland Sutton over Chris Olave this week?
It would genuinely be a tough task. Look, I'm sorry. I have always been a targets believer, and I have one game where I'm getting meaningful targets out of Chris Olave this season. One. And this is a tough matchup for them.
No, I would say one game. I mean, he had 6 and 8 and 10. I mean,
no, he has 10, 6, 6, 2.
Yeah, 6 is significant target share. I don't think that's that's not nothing. The 2, yes, absolutely. But look, Bo Nix, you talk about the secondaries that need to play on Saturday. Bo Nix needs to still be playing on Saturday. All right, the guy had 60 yards passing last week. I'm not gonna. That's
all people snooze.
What's that? What'd you say, Chris? Okay, I guess.
I said you gotta give his take. You gotta give him his take.
We can back and forth on each other's takes. That's the whole point of the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the show, is that we all have our different takes. I'm not disputing it. I'm not saying it's not not a good matchup for Courtland Sutton. It is, but we still have to take into factor who the hell the quarterback is, I think, to some degree. And the guy is playing 6 yards a game. As Bo Nix, I think he's had one 200-yard passing game so far this season.
No, he genuinely graded out really well the week prior.
He did. He actually had a top passing percentage, which I don't know how that happens, but he did.
Okay.
I didn't get into that Bo Nix thing. We'll talk about that a little bit next week because I actually had some number for Bo Nix.
Look, I'm not a Bo Nix believer, but I think everything else aligning makes it worth it.
Not going to dispute it's a good matchup. Not going to dispute that Courtland Sutton should be sniffing your flex territory. I'm with you on that one. I have to push back if you're going to be thinking about whether or not you play Sutton or Olave. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
On the whole, for the record, I am in on Sutton on the whole for the rest of the season. I think almost every week the rest of the year I would just insta-start Chris Olave over Courtland Sutton. I just want to at least make that clear.
No. I wasn't questioning. I wasn't questioning that part. It was only for this week. All right. So this is go to Chase real quick. Chase loves Brock Bowers this week. Second in targets at the tight end position, which we know has been an absolute train wreck. We've actually talked about that quite a bit this show. Just behind Adams, of course, and Jacoby Myers, and Adams is not going to be playing once again this week. Bowers, he's been a steady presence as a tight end. Last 2 weeks facing a tough Broncos defense. Yes, it wasn't great. He probably bounces back this week, though. I don't know. His message. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this. His message is all over the place. I can't read this. Basically, Chase loves Brock Bowers, which, yeah, right now Brock Bowers is an automatic tight end 3 because he's actually getting targets at the tight end position, which has been, the problem 101 with half these guys that we've been seeing out there. Chris, who is your crush this week?
Well, the problem for Chase to Brock Bowers is like last week when Devontae Adams was out, they just decided not to throw the ball to Brock Bowers either. But my guy that I love this week is Justin Fields. Justin Fields is the guy that I went off of my spiel about earlier on, but a guy who's been playing well. I know he had a turnover last week, but will continue to be the starting quarterback. Had 300 yards passing, 50 yards rushing. For the first time ever in Steeler history that a quarterback has achieved that feat, taking on a decimated Dallas defense that just got lit up by Daniel Jones. We watched Derrick Henry basically run right through this defense. They have no Micah Parsons. They have no Lawrence. They have no Overstreet. I don't even know. I think maybe Jerry Jones will try to play, or maybe Stephen Jones will try to play linebacker at some point. This Dallas defense is going to be run right through. Justin Fields is a guy trying to keep his position as a starting quarterback for this league. And for that Pittsburgh Steelers offense, Justin Fields, to me, it could be one of the top 3 quarterbacks you want to have in your lineup this week.
Love it. Agree with it. My crush, Dontavian Wicks. Look, he steps in for Christian Watson. Now, Watson may not be going on the IR. So long-term wise, again, we're going to talk about that tomorrow night at 8 o'clock as far as what that may look like. But for the next 2 weeks, I feel like it's safe to say Christian Watson probably not going to play with, even if they want to call it a mild high ankle sprain, however you want to label a high ankle sprain, probably missing at least 2 weeks. And you got to love him this week. So I have him as my wide receiver 11, while ECR's got him at wide receiver 32. That's criminally too low with Jordan Love being back. Wicks comes in last week, was the favorite target of Jordan Love, even despite the fact that Jaden Reed had a slightly better fantasy day. Wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 overall for both of those guys. You go up against a Rams team that is giving up the second most in expected points added per pass, the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers. We know Wicks takes on the Christian Watson role as far as the end zone targets go, which is pretty much 97.5, whatever point percent of the team's targets in the end zone. I exaggerate a little bit, of course, but he's getting the majority of them. When he started games, okay, he's had 7 games between last year and this year that he's either started or played the majority of as the starting wide receiver. He's averaging 12.2 half-point PPR points per game. That puts him as a top 20 receiver just off the rip. You add in the Rams matchup here, this is a top 12 receiver this week. And I like him next week, too, actually against Arizona. But my crush for this week, Dontavian Wicks. Before we wrap up the show, we do have one last question here. Antonio, would you do Allen, Waddle, and Chubb for Richardson and Nico Collins? Chris and Adam, help me out with this one.
Allen, Waddle, and Chubb for Richardson and Nico. Are you playing in a 3-receiver league or a 2-receiver league? Because that would make a big difference to me. If you're only playing a 2-receiver league, I would pull that deal because I think Nico Collins is the best player in the whole list of people you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. I'm assuming he's giving up Allen, Waddle, Chubb, Richardson, and Nico Collins. I'm assuming that's Josh Allen. Right?
Okay. So I thought I was Keenan Allen, so there you're good. That's a good point.
I'm assuming it's Josh Allen.
If that's Josh Allen,
then no.
Yeah, no. Yeah. No.
If it's Keenan Allen, I'm absolutely doing it.
No.
Adam, if it's Josh Allen, would you do it?
It depends on if I have a pivot from Richardson available. Like if you're in a league that somehow, I mean, look, there's work leagues out there where Baker's still on waivers. Like that's the reality of fantasy football.
Mangino, people hate him.
And if I'm in one of those, then I do consider it because I think the biggest jump from over replacement is going to be Nico Collins rather than the quarterback. Now, if waivers are scarce at quarterback, you're in a more competitive league, I'm not pulling that deal.
Yeah, I tend to agree. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today's show. I hope you all enjoyed it. It was happy times to be back, guys. Happy to be off the IR and talking fantasy football with you all. Guess what? We'll be back next week, same time, 9:30 here on our YouTube channel at the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Make sure you tune in then, engage with us live, and we will be live on Facebook and on the FF Advice Network on Twitter tomorrow. We will not be live on YouTube. We'll be coming out with the video for that on Friday. We'll release it then. But make sure you check us out. Always Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. We're available to you wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'll see you guys tomorrow night at 8.
40 TN.
Hey there. I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.